SpaceX is now worth more than $1 trillion, but here's what's shocking. It's still completely private. To put that in perspective, Apple is worth about $3 trillion and has been public for decades. Google hovers around $2 trillion, but Elon Musk and a handful of other billionaires own a company that's already in the trillion-dollar club without a single share trading on any stock exchange. This isn't venture capital hype for a trendy startup. This is a space launch company that's actually building rockets, launching satellites, and executing billion-dollar contracts with NASA and the Space Force. The reason SpaceX hit this valuation is genuinely wild. Investors apparently believe the company can dominate commercial space for the next 50 years. We are talking Mars missions, satellite internet across the planet, military contracts, entire new industries. And that belief has created a situation where just a few dozen billionaires now control one of the most valuable companies in human history. Some of these investors barely made headlines when they invested, and that's what makes this story fascinating. You probably know Elon's stake is huge, but the other billionaires backing SpaceX, they're a genuinely interesting group of entrepreneurs who have quietly assembled something extraordinary. And here's where it gets interesting. Their stakes reveal some surprising patterns about who's betting hardest on the future of space. To understand SpaceX's trillion-dollar valuation, you've got to go back to 2002, when Elon Musk founded the company in Los Angeles. At the time, everyone thought he was absolutely nuts. Conventional wisdom said launching rockets was purely the domain of governments and massive aerospace contractors like Boeing and Lockheed Martin. These companies had been building rockets for 60 years with virtually unlimited budgets. But Musk had a radical idea. What if you could make rockets cheap? And more importantly, what if you could make them reusable? See, the space shuttle famously cost $100 million per launch, and traditional rocket companies were still charging hundreds of millions each time. Musk wanted to build rockets that could land themselves and be flown again, like airplanes. For years, everyone doubted him. SpaceX's early launches failed spectacularly. The Falcon 1 exploded 3 times in a row. On the verge of complete bankruptcy in 2008, Musk somehow convinced investors to back a 4th attempt. It worked. By 2012, SpaceX had become the first private company to dock a spacecraft with the International Space Station. That moment changed everything. Suddenly, NASA was paying SpaceX billions to resupply the station. The Space Force awarded massive contracts. Private satellite companies wanted launches. Each success attracted new investors, each believing SpaceX could achieve the impossible, reduce launch costs by 90%. The trillion-dollar valuation isn't just hype. It's based on genuinely stunning economics. SpaceX has achieved something no other company has. They've made rockets absurdly reliable and affordable. Today, a Falcon 9 launch costs around $60 million compared to $500 million for traditional providers. That's an 80% price reduction. But here's what really gets investors excited. Starship. This next-generation rocket will be fully reusable and eventually cost under $15 million per launch. Imagine accessing space for the price of a handful of commercial jets. The applications are staggering. Starlink, SpaceX's satellite internet constellation, already has hundreds of thousands of subscribers worldwide and generates over $1 billion annually. That's just the start. The military side matters too. The Space Force has awarded SpaceX over $10 billion in national security contracts. Then there's Mars. If SpaceX establishes a self-sustaining human settlement on Mars, which Musk claims could happen in 10 to 20 years, we are talking about an entirely new economy. Right now, it sounds like science fiction, but investors are pricing in these possibilities. When you value a company, you don't just look at today's revenue. You look at where it could be in 20 years. SpaceX has proven execution credibility. They've hit their targets repeatedly, so investors believe, and that belief drives the trillion-dollar valuation. But here's what the headlines aren't telling you about the investors behind it. Let's talk about who actually owns SpaceX. Elon Musk is the largest shareholder. He owns roughly 40% of the company, making his stake worth approximately $400 billion. But he's not alone in the club. Some of SpaceX's earliest and most significant investors are genuinely fascinating. There's Jared Isaacman, who made billions in payment processing. He's personally flown to space twice on SpaceX's Dragon capsule. And on his second mission, he performed a spacewalk outside the capsule at incredible altitude. His stake in SpaceX gives him direct influence over a company, enabling his personal space ambitions. Then there's the Arnault family, the luxury empire behind Louis Vuitton, Dior, and Fendi. They've invested hundreds of millions in SpaceX. Why would Europe's wealthiest family invest in rockets? Because Starlink could eventually be worth more than SpaceX's launch business itself. Global internet infrastructure is worth astronomical amounts. Google has also invested billions in SpaceX through various rounds. The United States military and NASA have pumped in 10 billion plus as well, making them indirect stakeholders. Each investor believes something slightly different. Some are betting on Mars settlement. Others see Starlink as humanity's internet backbone. Others believe in government contracts, but they all share one conviction: SpaceX will dominate commercial space for decades. This diversity of investors actually makes the trillion-dollar number more credible. They're not all betting on the same outcome. Here's what makes SpaceX's trillion-dollar valuation so mind-bending. Most trillion-dollar companies are public and have existed for decades. Apple, public since 1980. Microsoft, public since 1986. Google, public since 2004. These companies have stock prices set by millions of traders buying and selling every single second. But SpaceX is completely private. The valuation comes from private funding rounds where venture capitalists and billionaires negotiate what they think the company is worth. There's no stock ticker, no daily price update, no quarterly earnings call. The trillion-dollar number is essentially one collective bet. If someone tried to buy SpaceX tomorrow, somebody would pay $1 trillion for it. Is that definitely accurate? Nobody truly knows. But it's the most recent number from investor negotiations. To put this in perspective, that's more than Tesla, more than JP Morgan Chase, more than virtually every company that's publicly traded, except Apple, Microsoft, Saudi Aramco, and a couple of others. SpaceX is worth more than ExxonMobil, more than Berkshire Hathaway, more than the entire financial sector in most countries. It's an extraordinarily elite company. The reason this matters is that it shows investors are willing to deploy absurd capital into long-term bets on transformative technology. SpaceX isn't profitable yet. It's burning billions on Starship development. But the market believes the eventual return is worth the risk. And this is where the real implications become clear. The trillion-dollar SpaceX valuation has created a fascinating new dynamic in the space industry. Traditional aerospace contractors, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, have dominated space for 60 years, but they are now racing to catch up to a company founded in the 21st century. SpaceX has proven that a younger, leaner operation with cutting-edge technology can outcompete them. That's driving massive change across the industry. First, launch costs are collapsing everywhere. Every aerospace company is now racing to build reusable rockets because SpaceX demonstrated it's possible and profitable. Blue Origin, founded by Jeff Bezos, is chasing SpaceX with their New Glenn rocket. Chinese companies are developing reusable rockets. Even traditional contractors are completely pivoting their strategies. Second, space is becoming genuinely accessible. Smaller companies can now afford to launch satellites. This is democratizing an industry that used to be the exclusive domain of governments and megacorporations. Starlink is already delivering internet to remote parts of the planet where traditional infrastructure never arrived. Third, there's a serious geopolitical angle. The United States wants to maintain dominance in space. SpaceX is absolutely key to that strategy. China and other nations are investing heavily in their own programs. The trillion-dollar valuation reflects how seriously the world is taking the emerging space economy. Within a decade, space-based services could be worth hundreds of billions annually. SpaceX investors are betting they'll capture a substantial chunk of that market. Let's decode how a private company actually gets valued at $1 trillion, because it works completely differently from public company stock prices. When SpaceX raises funding, investors buy equity at a certain valuation. In the most recent rounds, investors apparently decided a piece of SpaceX is worth roughly $1 trillion total. That's how the number gets established. Here's how investors actually calculate this. They examine revenue first. SpaceX generates billions annually from launches and Starlink. Second, growth trajectory. Is revenue accelerating? Absolutely yes, dramatically. Third, profitability timeline. When will the company stop burning cash and actually turn profits? Probably 2 to 5 years. Fourth, addressable market size. How large could this business eventually become? Potentially astronomical. Satellite internet alone could be worth hundreds of billions. Fifth, execution track record. Has the company actually delivered on previous promises? SpaceX has consistently and repeatedly. These factors combine to create a value estimate. In SpaceX's case, investors are saying, "We believe this company's future profit potential justifies a $1 trillion valuation today." It's an educated guess based on track record and stated ambitions. The reason SpaceX's valuation matters to you is simple. Valuations drive investment decisions. When SpaceX hits $1 trillion, every venture capitalist worldwide wants to find the next SpaceX. That means capital flows into ambitious projects. Some will revolutionize industries. Others will fail spectacularly. But SpaceX's $1 trillion valuation signals where brilliant people think the future is heading. Here's what SpaceX's $1 trillion valuation means for you. Commercial space is becoming a genuine industry, not a novelty or a billionaire vanity project. The next decade will reveal whether companies like SpaceX can actually execute on the promises that justify these extraordinary valuations. Watch 3 things closely. First, Starship. If it succeeds and becomes routine and cheap, SpaceX's valuation might actually be conservative. If development stalls or costs spiral wildly out of control, investors could take serious losses. Second, profitability. SpaceX talks about making real money from Starship and expanded Starlink. If they turn profit while expanding, the company becomes even more valuable. If they stay cash negative indefinitely, serious questions emerge. Third, competition. Can Blue Origin, Axiom Space, or other companies actually challenge SpaceX's dominance in any meaningful way? Real competition would reshape the entire space economy completely. The billionaires backing SpaceX, Musk, Isaacman, the Arnolds, and others, are betting that commercial space is the frontier industry of this century. History suggests they might be right. Satellites provide global internet. Space-based manufacturing could become real. Mars colonization might happen in your lifetime. The $1 trillion valuation reflects these possibilities. The next decade will either validate that optimism or prove it wildly overconfident. That's the story worth following closely. Follow for daily AI news.